Dramily.com, unlimited drama series.
The notification ping at 2:47 a.m. should have been my first clue that my perfectly orchestrated life was about to implode like a controlled demolition. I was hunched over my laptop in the cluttered home office of our suburban Massachusetts house, trying to recover corrupted files from my IT repair shop's server, when Sarah's phone lit up on the desk beside me. "Girls' night was amazing. Can't wait to tell you about catching a real man tonight. Your husband's so clueless, he thinks antidepressants fix everything, LOL." The message was from her best friend Jessica, and it was displayed right there on the lock screen because Sarah never bothered with privacy settings. Why would she? I was just Eddie, the reliable IT guy who fixed everyone's computers and never asked questions. My fingers froze over the keyboard. 22 years of marriage. And apparently, I'd been demoted to a punchline about mental health medication. The Prozac I'd been taking for 6 months after my dad died wasn't exactly a state secret, but hearing it weaponized in casual conversation felt like getting sucker punched in a dark alley. I stared at that message until the screen went black, then picked up Sarah's phone. No passcode, another sign of how little she thought of my detective skills. The full conversation thread made my stomach drop into my shoes. Jessica: "So how's Operation Upgrade going?" Sarah: "Trent's incredible. Finally found someone who appreciates real ambition instead of hiding behind blue-collar mediocrity." Jessica: "When are you telling Eddie?" Sarah: "Why rush? He's so buried in his little computer world. I could probably move Trent in and Eddie wouldn't notice for weeks." I scrolled through weeks of messages, each one a fresh knife twist. Detailed descriptions of their encounters at the Riverside Motel, mockery of my depression, my business, my pathetic attempts at romance, plans to clean out our joint accounts after she established residency with her new boyfriend. Sarah Morrison, she'd kept her maiden name for professional reasons, was a creative director at Pinnacle PR, surrounded by image-obsessed colleagues who treated marriage like a starter car you traded up from. I'd always known her work friends looked down on me, but I'd assumed Sarah defended our relationship in private. Apparently, I'd assumed wrong about a lot of things. The bedroom door creaked, and I quickly set the phone back down, minimizing my work and pretending to focus on server diagnostics. Sarah padded into the office wearing the silk nightgown I'd bought her for Christmas, the one she claimed was too fancy for every day. "Still working?" she asked, but her tone carried that familiar edge of irritation rather than concern. "Server crashed. Lost 3 clients' data backups." I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "How was girls' night?" "Fine. Jessica's dating drama, you know how it is." She moved behind my chair, and for a moment I thought she might touch my shoulder like she used to. Instead, she reached around me to grab her phone. "You should get some sleep. You look terrible." "Thanks for the pep talk. I'm serious, Eddie. The bags under your eyes, the weight you've gained. Maybe talk to Dr. Peterson about adjusting your medication." There it was, the casual cruelty disguised as concern. I'd been seeing Dr. Peterson for grief counseling after Dad's heart attack, and Sarah had initially been supportive. Now she was using my mental health as ammunition in conversations with her friends. "I'll consider it," I said, turning back to the screen. She kissed the top of my head, a gesture that once meant affection, but now felt like marking territory. "Don't stay up too late." After she left, I sat in the blue glow of the monitor, processing what I'd learned. My wife was cheating with some guy named Trent, planning to leave me financially devastated and treating my depression like a character flaw she had to endure. 22 years. We'd met in college, both of us ambitious and broke. I'd built my IT business from nothing while she climbed the PR ladder. We talked about kids, bought this house, weathered my parents' deaths and her mother's cancer. I thought we were partners. Instead, I'd been the opening act for her real life. I opened a new browser window and started researching divorce lawyers, private investigators, asset protection strategies. If Sarah wanted to play games, she was about to discover that the clueless husband had been paying attention to more than just computer screens. My phone buzzed with a text from Jonas, my best friend and the owner of Murphy's Tavern downtown. Poker game Thursday if you're interested. Heard you could use a distraction. Jonas was an ex-cop who'd opened the bar after taking early retirement. He had a sixth sense for when people were in trouble, probably from 20 years of domestic disturbance calls. I'd been avoiding social events lately, using work as an excuse. But maybe it was time to stop hiding. I'll be there, I typed back. And Jonas, I might need some advice about surveillance equipment. The response came back immediately. Trouble in paradise? Something like that. We'll talk Thursday. Bring cash for poker and an appetite for revenge. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Sarah thought she was playing chess while I fumbled around playing checkers. She was about to learn that I'd been studying the board a lot longer than she realized. Thursday night at Murphy's Tavern felt like stepping into a Raymond Chandler novel. Dim lighting, worn leather booths, and the kind of honest conversation that only happened over whiskey and poker chips. Jonas had cleared out the back room for our weekly game, which usually included Tommy from the fire department, Marcus the electrician, and Dave, who ran the auto shop on Elm Street. Tonight it was just Jonas and me. So, Jonas said, dealing the cards with practiced efficiency, want to tell me why you're suddenly interested in surveillance equipment? Or should I pretend this is about catching employees stealing office supplies? I picked up my cards, pair of eights, nothing spectacular. Sarah's cheating. Jonas didn't even blink. How long have you known? Since Monday night. Found text messages on her phone. And you haven't confronted her because? Because I'm not stupid. I tossed 2 chips into the pot. She's planning to clean me out financially and make it look like I'm the bad guy. Probably claim I'm mentally unstable because of the antidepressants. Jonas raised my bet. Smart Money says she's been setting this up for months. The depression angle gives her ammunition for a contested divorce. That's what I'm thinking, I called his raise. What would you do? Legally. Document everything? Protect your assets? Hire a good lawyer. Jonas flipped 3 cards onto the table. 2 eights and a king. Personally, I'd make sure she regretted underestimating me. I kept my expression neutral despite hitting 3 of a kind. What kind of documentation? Photos, videos, financial records, witness statements. Build a case that makes her lawyer advise settlement instead of going to trial. Jonas studied his cards. The Riverside Motel has security cameras in the parking lot. Manager owes me a favor from the old days. That's not exactly legal. Neither is adultery and financial planning to defraud a spouse. But here we are. Jonas met my bet. Question is, how far are you willing to go? I thought about Sarah's laughter in those text messages, the casual cruelty of using my grief and depression as entertainment for her friends. Further than she thinks. We played in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the kind of quiet that only came with old friendships. Jonas and I had known each other since high school, back when he was the star quarterback and I was the kid who fixed the scoreboard electronics. He'd always been the popular one, but he never made me feel small about it. Tell me about this Trent character, Jonas said finally. All I know is what I read in the messages. Some kind of consultant at her firm, younger than me, apparently very impressed with his own ambitions. Pinnacle PR, right? I know a guy who does their security installations. Might be worth a conversation. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Working late tonight, don't wait up. I showed Jonas the message. He snorted. Working late at the Riverside Motel, maybe. Probably. I folded my hand despite the 3 eights. You know what kills me? I actually believed her when she said she was worried about my mental health. Thought she was being supportive. Narcissists are good at that, Jonas said. They... weaponize your vulnerabilities while convincing you they're helping. Speaking from experience, my ex-wife wrote the playbook. Jonas gathered the cards and started shuffling. Spent 2 years telling me I was paranoid and jealous while she was screwing her yoga instructor. Made me feel crazy for noticing the obvious. What happened? I documented everything, filed for divorce, and made sure everyone in town knew exactly why our marriage ended. Jonas dealt a new hand. She moved to California with the yoga guy. Last I heard, he left her for someone younger. Karma. Karma's too slow. Sometimes you have to give it a push. I picked up my new cards. Absolute garbage. But I stayed in the hand anyway. Sarah thinks I'm weak because I needed medication after Dad died. Grief isn't weakness, Eddie. It's human. Try telling that to her friends. According to the text messages, my depression is hilarious dinner party conversation. Jonas's expression darkened. She's mocking you for grieving your father? Apparently, antidepressants are a character flaw in her social circle. Jesus Christ! Jonas threw his cards down. Eddie, that's not just cheating. That's psychological abuse. I'd been thinking the same thing, but hadn't wanted to put that label on it. Hearing Jonas say it out loud made it real. So, what do I do about it? First, we get evidence. Photos, recordings, documentation of the financial planning. Then we make sure she understands exactly what kind of man she's been underestimating. Meaning? Jonas smiled, and for a moment I could see the cop he used to be. The one who didn't let bullies win. Meaning we remind your wife that actions have consequences. And sometimes those consequences come with interest. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. Probably won't be home until very late. Love you. The casual lie felt like a slap. I showed Jonas the message. Love you, he read aloud, while she's texting from another man's bed. How do you know she's there now? Because cheaters are creatures of habit. Thursday night working late means Thursday night at the motel. Jonas stood up and grabbed his jacket. Want to take a drive? 20 minutes later, we were parked across the street from the Riverside Motel, watching Sarah's Honda Civic in the parking lot, next to a silver BMW with vanity plates that read TRENT1. Subtle, Jonas muttered, taking photos with a telephoto lens. What kind of grown man puts his name on license plates? The kind who steals other men's wives, apparently. We sat there for 2 hours, documenting arrivals and departures, taking photos of the cars, the room number, the timestamps. It felt surreal, like watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. At 11:30, Sarah and Trent emerged from room 247. Even from across the street, I could see he was everything I wasn't. Tall, athletic, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly car payment. Sarah was laughing at something he said, touching his arm with the casual intimacy she used to reserve for me. They kissed goodbye next to his BMW, a long, passionate embrace that made my stomach turn. Then, Sarah got in her car and drove home to the bed she shared with her husband, while Trent headed in the opposite direction, toward the expensive side of town. Got everything we need, Jonas said, reviewing the photos on his camera. Clear shots of both vehicles, timestamps, room number. This is divorce court gold. Good. I started the engine, but instead of heading home, I turned toward the motel parking lot. What are you doing? Sending a message. I parked next to Trent's BMW and pulled a bottle of my antidepressants from my jacket pocket. I'd been carrying them around like a talisman lately, a reminder of Sarah's casual cruelty. I placed the bottle on his windshield with a note I'd written earlier. You'll need these when karma catches up. Then I took my house key and dragged it along the driver's side of his car, leaving a long, deep scratch in the pristine silver paint. Eddie, Jonas said quietly, that's destruction of property. So is destroying a 22-year marriage. I got back in my car feeling lighter than I had in months. Besides, how's he going to explain how it happened? File a police report that admits he was at a motel with another man's wife? Jonas was quiet for a moment, then started laughing. You know what? You're right. And that scratch is going to cost him at least $2,000 to fix properly. Consider it a down payment on what he owes me. As we drove home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The satisfaction of taking action instead of just enduring whatever life threw at me. Sarah thought she was married to a pushover who would quietly accept whatever scraps of affection she decided to throw his way. She was about to discover her mistake. The next morning, Sarah came down to breakfast looking like she'd barely slept. Her phone had been buzzing constantly since 6 a.m., and she kept glancing at it with increasing agitation. Everything okay? I asked, pouring coffee with deliberate casualness. Someone vandalized Trent's car last night. She was scrolling through what looked like angry text messages. Scratched it up pretty badly. Trent? From work, the consultant I mentioned. Sarah's voice had that careful tone people used when they were trying to sound casual about something important. He's been having problems with his ex-girlfriend, probably her doing. I nodded sympathetically. That's terrible. Where did it happen? Sarah paused, realizing she was about to walk into a trap. He was out late, some parking lot downtown. Well, hopefully his insurance covers vandalism. I took a sip of coffee. Speaking of insurance...
2,000! I didn't get any jewelry.
I was ending
With a
it.
diamond goodbye gift?
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
I've been thinking we should review our policies. Make sure our assets are properly protected. Sarah's head snapped up. Why? Just being responsible. You never know what might happen. The suspicion in her eyes was almost comical. After 22 years of marriage, she should have known I wasn't the type to make casual conversation about insurance policies. But she'd been so busy planning her exit strategy. She'd forgotten I was capable of strategic thinking. I can handle our insurance, she said finally. I'm sure you can. But I'd like to be more involved in our financial planning. I smiled. After all, we're partners, right? Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time she grabbed it immediately, and I caught a glimpse of the message. Found a bottle of pills on my car, too. This is getting scary. Poor Trent, I said. Sounds like his ex is really escalating things. Yeah. Sarah was typing rapidly. I should probably get to work early. Help him deal with the situation. Of course. That's what good colleagues do. After Sarah left, I called in sick to my own job and spent the morning researching private investigators, divorce attorneys, and asset protection strategies. By noon, I had consultations scheduled with 3 lawyers and a meeting set up with Jonas's contact at the security company. But first, I had a more immediate problem to address. My phone had been buzzing all morning with messages from our mutual friends, Tommy, Marcus, Dave, and their wives, the same group we'd been socializing with for years, the people who'd been to our barbecues and birthday parties and anniversary dinners. The messages all had the same theme: concern about my behavior and suggestions that I get help. Tommy, Sarah's worried about you, man. Maybe ease up on the paranoia? Marcus, heard you've been following people around town. That's not healthy, Eddie. Dave, your wife's scared you're having some kind of breakdown. We're here if you need to talk. It was a coordinated campaign, obviously orchestrated by Sarah to make me look unstable. She was already building her narrative for the divorce. The depressed husband who became paranoid and erratic, forcing his loving wife to seek comfort elsewhere. I was impressed by the strategy, even as it infuriated me. By Thursday, the pressure had reached a breaking point. Our usual poker game was scheduled for that night, but instead of meeting at Murphy's Tavern, Tommy had suggested we meet at his house. More private, he'd said. Better for serious conversations. I knew what was coming. An intervention. My friends were going to sit me down and explain why I needed to stop harassing my wife and her colleague, probably with a lot of concerned looks and gentle suggestions about increasing my medication. Jonas picked me up at 7, and we drove to Tommy's house in silence. I could feel his tension, the way he kept glancing at me like he was worried I might do something unpredictable. You know this is a setup, right? I said finally. Yeah, I figured. Jonas pulled into Tommy's driveway. They're good people, Eddie. They're just getting played. I know, but that doesn't make this any less humiliating. Tommy's living room felt like a courtroom when we walked in. Marcus and Dave were already there, sitting on the couch with expressions of forced casualness. Tommy was pacing by the fireplace, clearly uncomfortable with whatever role he'd been assigned in this drama. Eddie, Tommy said, we need to talk. About what? About Sarah. About the way you've been acting lately. Marcus leaned forward, using the voice he probably reserved for talking jumpers off ledges. We're worried about you, man. Worried how? Following her around, vandalizing cars, making accusations. Dave shook his head. This isn't like you. I looked around the room at these men I'd considered friends for over a decade. They genuinely believed they were helping, which made their betrayal even more painful. What did Sarah tell you exactly? That you've been paranoid since starting the antidepressants, Tommy said. Accusing her of cheating, following her to work, harassing her colleagues. And you believed her? Eddie, Marcus said gently, she showed us the texts you've been sending. The threats, the paranoid rambling, it's not healthy. What texts? Dave pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot. It was my number, but the message read, I know what you're doing, you cheating whore. I'm watching you. I'd never sent that message in my life. This isn't from me, I said. Come on, man, Tommy said. It's your number. Numbers can be spoofed. Anyone with basic tech skills can make a text look like it came from someone else. The three men exchanged glances, the kind of look that said they thought I was making excuses. Eddie, Marcus said, we think you should check yourself into a facility. Get some professional help. A facility? Just for a few days, until the medication gets balanced out. I realized what was happening. Sarah wasn't just building a case for divorce. She was trying to have me committed. If I agreed to get help, it would be admission that I was mentally unstable. If I refused, it would be evidence that I was in denial about my condition. Either way, she won. And if I don't agree to this, then we'll have to consider other options, Tommy said quietly. Like what? Like calling the police about the harassment and vandalism. I looked at Jonas, who'd been silent through the entire conversation. He was staring at his hands, jaw clenched with suppressed anger. Jonas, I said, you have anything to add to this intervention? He looked up, and I saw 20 years of friendship in his eyes. Yeah, I think you're all being played by a woman who's smarter and more manipulative than any of you realize. Jonas, Dave started, but Jonas cut him off. Did any of you actually investigate these accusations? Did you ask to see the original texts instead of screenshots? Did you wonder why Eddie would suddenly start acting completely out of character? We're trying to help our friend, Marcus said. No, you're helping his wife destroy him. Jonas stood up, and you're too stupid to see it. The room erupted in angry voices, accusations flying back and forth. In the chaos, I slipped outside and called Sarah's number from Tommy's landline. She answered on the second ring. Hello? It's me. Eddie? Why are you calling from Tommy's phone? Because I wanted to hear your voice when I told you that your little intervention failed. Silence. I don't know what you're talking about. The fake text messages. The coordinated campaign to make me look unstable. The plan to have me committed so you can claim I'm mentally incompetent. More silence. Eddie, you're scaring me. Good. Because you should be scared. I kept my voice calm, controlled. I know about Trent. I know about the Riverside Motel. I know about your plan to clean out our accounts and leave me with nothing. I think you need help. I think you need a better lawyer. Because the one you're going to need is going to be very expensive. I hung up and went back inside, where Jonas was facing down three angry men who'd realized they'd been manipulated but weren't ready to admit it. We're leaving, I announced. Eddie, Tommy said, we're just trying to help. No, you're trying to help my wife commit fraud and adultery. I looked at each of them in turn. And when this is over, when the truth comes out, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you chose to believe a liar over a friend. Jonas and I walked out into the night, leaving 20 years of friendship scattered behind us like broken glass. Well, Jonas said as we got in his car, that went about as well as expected. Better, actually. Now I know exactly who I'm dealing with. So what's next? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for the divorce attorney I'd researched earlier. Now we stop playing defense, I said, hitting the call button. Time to remind my wife that she married a man, not a victim. 3 weeks later, Sarah's carefully constructed world began to collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. It started on a Tuesday morning when she discovered our joint checking account had been frozen. Then, the credit cards stopped working. By noon, the locks on our house had been changed, and she found herself standing on the front porch with a suitcase and a restraining order that prohibited her from entering the property. I watched from the living room window. She called Trent, her voice rising to near hysteria as she explained that her crazy husband had somehow managed to legally lock her out of her own home. What she didn't know was that I'd spent those 3 weeks documenting everything. Photos from the motel, screenshots of the real text messages between her and Jessica, bank records showing suspicious withdrawals that coincided with her girls' nights, a complete financial audit that revealed she'd been slowly draining our savings account for months. My lawyer, Patricia Hernandez, was a shark in a business suit who specialized in high-conflict divorces. She'd taken one look at my evidence and smiled the kind of smile that made opposing counsel consider early retirement. Your wife made a critical error, Patricia had explained during our first meeting. She assumed you were too depressed and passive to fight back. That assumption is going to cost her everything. The restraining order was just the opening move. Based on the fake text messages and coordinated harassment campaign, Patricia had convinced a judge that Sarah posed a threat to my mental health and financial security. The order didn't just keep her away from the house, it prevented her from accessing any joint accounts or making any major financial decisions without court approval. Sarah's next mistake was calling the police to report that I'd illegally changed the locks. The responding officer was a friend of Jonas's who listened patiently to her story, then explained that the restraining order gave me full legal right to secure the property. When Sarah started screaming about her belongings, the officer offered to escort her inside to collect essentials, but warned that any attempt to remove items not specifically listed in the court order would result in theft charges. I met them at the door with a detailed inventory of everything in the house, including photographs and serial numbers for all electronics and valuables. Sarah could take her clothes and personal items, but everything else stayed put until the divorce was finalized. "This is insane," she told the officer. "He's having a mental breakdown." "Ma'am," the officer replied, "from what I can see, your husband is following proper legal procedures. If you have concerns about the restraining order, you'll need to address them through the court system." While Sarah packed her suitcase, I sat in the kitchen reviewing the final piece of my revenge strategy. Jonas had delivered it that morning, a manila envelope containing surveillance photos, financial records, and a detailed report on Trent Morrison, the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. Trent, it turned out, wasn't quite the successful consultant Sarah thought she'd landed. He was actually a failed model turned social media influencer who made his living scamming lonely women through dating apps and social media. His consulting work at Pinnacle PR was unpaid, an internship he'd talked his way into by claiming connections he didn't have. The BMW with the vanity plates, leased under his mother's name because his credit was too damaged to qualify for financing. The expensive clothes, knockoffs purchased from overseas suppliers, and resold to his Instagram followers at massive markups. Sarah had left her husband for a con artist, who was even more financially unstable than she'd accused me of being. But the real bombshell was buried deeper in the report. Trent wasn't just scamming random women. He was specifically targeting the wives of small business owners, using his looks and charm to extract information about their husbands' finances. Sarah wasn't his first married conquest, and she wouldn't be his last. She was a mark, not a girlfriend. I was still processing this information when Sarah came downstairs with her suitcase, escorted by the patient police officer. "This isn't over, Eddie," she said, trying to project confidence, despite the obvious panic in her eyes. "You're right," I replied calmly. "It's not over. It's just getting started." After they left, I called Jonas. Phase 2? Already in motion. My contact at Pinnacle PR is very interested in learning about their new consultant's background. Apparently, several clients have been asking questions about missing jewelry after company events. And the other thing, Trent's landlord received an anonymous tip about illegal subletting and unreported income. Building inspection is scheduled for tomorrow. I felt a moment of guilt about the collateral damage, then remembered Sarah's laughter in those text messages, her casual cruelty about my grief and depression. She'd chosen to weaponize my mental health struggles for her entertainment. Now she could learn what real consequences felt like. The next morning, I drove to my office for the first time in weeks. My employees, 3 young techs who'd been running the business while I dealt with my family emergency, greeted me with obvious relief. "Boss," said Kevin, my lead technician, "we've been getting calls all week from people asking if you're okay. Something about you having a breakdown?" "Just some personal issues that are now resolved," I said. Anyone specific asking questions? Mostly wives of your poker buddies. Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez. They seemed really concerned. The coordination was impressive. Sarah had mobilized an entire network of concerned wives to spread the narrative that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. In a small community like ours, that kind of gossip could destroy a business overnight. Time to control the narrative. I spent the afternoon calling every client, every vendor, every business contact I'd built relationships with over 15 years. I didn't go into details, but I made it clear that I was the victim of a deliberate campaign of harassment, and that anyone spreading rumors about my mental health or business practices would be hearing from my attorney. Most people were understanding. A few were clearly uncomfortable with the drama. But bye.